Good to see everybody. My name is GP McLear. I'm a partner at Pecan PR and one of the co-founders. We are a firm that has helped nonprofits across the state with political advocacy, um, whether that's building a board policy around this and working with board and stakeholders on advocacy work or real-time advocacy assistance. We've helped clients across the spectrum, from environmental groups to early childhood, homelessness, housing, and a lot more. So, thank you for being here. Thanks to Jeff for having us. I have a deep background in the arts, very familiar with the Arts Alliance after spending 6 years at the Arts Alliance, and have a deep passion for the arts, of course. And so, really happy to be here today with y'all. Um, I, if you don't mind in the chat, at least putting your name and organization, that would be super helpful. I'm going to try to curate some of this content to make sure it's relevant for the types of organizations that are here, as best I can. But it'll be applicable to everybody regardless. Don't worry. And just to, we'll put things in the chat just to keep things a little bit easy for me to find really quick too. I also wanted to talk a little bit about one more thing about PKNPR. I wanted to mention we are advocates. We're not lobbyists. We are not registered lobbyists. We help the organizations know who to talk to, how to talk to them, and when to talk to them, essentially. And so we are not a registered lobbyist, but have a lot of experience between me and my other co-founder Meredith, who some of you may have met 2 weeks ago. They were on that call in this space. One quick and I meant to say attach this to your name and organization. So keep your hands on the keyboard for a second. I have sort of an informal quick poll. I would also love to know on low, medium, or high, the amount of experience that you yourself or your organization have had in advocacy, or how comfortable you feel in advocacy. So putting out like low, this is kind of newer space for me and my organization. Medium, we do this sometimes, we dabble in it, but we're not all the time. And high, we're doing this a lot right now. So that would also be helpful to know as we go through, just to make sure I'm helping everybody out as best I can. We will. This is also, feel free to jump in if you have a specific question. I may not be able to see you all or catch the chat in time, so please feel free to interrupt me and say, "Hey, I got a question or something that happened to our organization that I want to highlight for folks." I also told Jeff to do the same thing in case there's something broadly that I need to double down on or go deeper on. So, with that, I hope everybody's having a great day, and I hope that today my goal is that you feel a little bit more comfortable in this space than you did coming into this meeting, particularly those who are newer to this advocacy work. So, but I think for an organization, I think this is really helpful for you to take back. So, I'm going to dive in. First, let me say this. First, we're going to cover some advocacy principles. This is for your organization. This is a good tool that we have done with clients across the state to frame how do you say yes or no to things when you're advocating, because it's really easy to say yes to a lot of things. And so we kind of help folks. We'll go through a framework on how to kind of set that tone. Well, then we'll also dig in. Then, of course, we're digging into advocacy capital and what it takes to do advocacy work, and making sure that organizations are reflective and knowledgeable on when you take an action, you're going to be spending some kind of capital. So that's the flow for the day. We'll end with some open discussion. If anyone's got questions or wants to go down a cul-de-sac, we will do that towards the end. But again, feel free to interrupt as well with questions. Now let's dig in. So I want to first start with this. This is what I'd like to say, this sort of current state, where we are in a couple things. So first of all, why I'm really glad that Jeff has brought this to y'all. Arts organizations, I feel like, are unique. Every sector has their own uniqueness, to be fair, but this is how I think y'all are unique than other nonprofit organizations, and other types. Those type of policies that are out there that you are having to navigate, your ability to produce, your ability to curate, works, and your subject matter that you focus on can touch a wide, may touch a lot of different societal trends and or issues. You have a lot of power in how and what you highlight, what you produce, and then how you do your work. And so you guys are unique in that you have this ability to produce brand new works of art that may touch on societal issues or curate stuff from your repertoire that can do the same thing. And so that is really unique from a lot of different organizations. And so I like to honor that. Like it's a lot of power in that, but also can sometimes make it a little bit challenging in this environment when there are so many things you could talk about and how you talk about them that there may be a consideration of how do we use this as a tool or how do we be cautious about using that tool. Both are valid thoughts to go through. We're also finding that, and you are feeling this, I imagine as well, that politics are drifting into nonprofit missions more than ever before. And any business really, not just nonprofits, but politics are drifting into new areas for everybody, and that for arts organizations is a little bit different in a lot of ways. All this is the types of issues that we're dealing with are different. The methods and practices behind those issues are also different. For instance, we all typically try to stay out of a courtroom, and there seems to be a lot of activity in the court right now. So this is new territory for a lot of folks. And what do organizations do when you are finding politics drifting in your mission without asking for it? And that is creating a challenge for boards and staff to really how they how they approach this work. There's also the speed and volume and complexity of what's going on right now. Some of that speed, volume, and complexity is a strategy, but it is a reality we have to deal with and wrestle with, and balancing all of that with the work that we have to do every day. And so that is kind of the current state of play that you guys have a lot on your plate. You have a lot of factors at play, and then you're feeling this either pressure because things are coming at you, drifting into your mission, and feeling like you're being impacted, either impeded or maybe even advanced, but you're being impacted by these political conversations, or those that you serve may be feeling that, and so you have this sort of unique this unique position or pressure to do something, and so that's kind of where we are right now, and I hope that rings true because that's what we're seeing from folks across sectors. And so to understand how you're going to take those actions that you're feeling maybe you should take and you're contemplating taking, first, we want to focus on understanding what are you willing to spend anything on. And we'll get to what we mean by spend, but I'll jump ahead for a second and say it's not just finances. We're talking about financial, social, reputational, political, all different types of capital that you have to consider. So to understand the capital that you have that you can spend, first, let's talk about what are you willing to spend it on. There will be a little bit of, well, I should have said it before I hit next, but a little bit of, we're going to take a break, like a 60-second break here for a second. I would love for folks to make sure that on your screen or on your phone in front of you, or if you have a notepad next to you, to write down or read your mission statement for your organization or your agency. I'm going to take a second and let you all do that, and I'll go through why in about 45 seconds or so. So go ahead and find your mission statement on your website. If you want to share it in the chat, feel free to. I would love for at least one person to, and as long as you're okay with me using that as an example, but no pressure if you don't. It's okay. But go ahead and pull up your mission statement and give it a read. Okay, so thanks, Chelsea, for being the guinea pig there for me. So caution, I might use that. Um, what first we start with your mission statement. We're talking about what are we going to spend our advocacy capital on? When are we going to take action in these more political conversations? We have to start with our mission statement, because your mission statement is going to answer a few things. Of course, we all sort of learn the legal side of, like, it's of what your mission statement, what the purpose of your mission statement is for your organization. But I think it's important to identify within your mission statement who are the subjects, to use, go back to grammar in seventh grade, the subjects of your mission statement. And so, reading through your mission statement, think about who those subjects are. This is where that pen and paper may come in handy, or at least have it in your brain. I won't grade you on it, don't worry. But what are the who or what are the subjects of your mission? Sometimes they're going to, and I kind of think of it in two ways: explicitly or implicitly. So, for instance, Chelsea, I'm going to use yours. And if you want to, if you're okay with me putting on the spot, I hope that's okay. But can you maybe come off mute and tell me who the subjects are of Engaging Creative Minds mission statement is? There's no wrong answer.
The intention is that it's K through 12 students in South Carolina.
Great. Would that include implicitly those that are around those students as well? You think? Would you interpret it that way, or no? You guys are trying to draw that hard line.
Well, it's also teachers and school staff, summer staff. So yeah, the net casts wide on that. Now that you're saying.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, no, that's great. That's what I think it's helpful for organizations to think through. Both of those questions. Again, there's no wrong answer, but it's about understanding who is your mission for, or what is your mission for. Some of y'all may have missions that are more work centric, like that. I think Greenville Chautauqua might be close to this. Thank you, Lara. Sorry, I hope one of those is correct. That it is work focused. Like maybe it is about producing certain kinds of work. So that's more of a what, and that's great. But it's important to understand those because that is what your mission is about. Your mission is to do these things for this purpose. Um, and then I also like to layer on top of that, if we're talking about advocacy, expectations, because there is a lot of merit to meeting expectations, or at the very least managing expectations, particularly with those that are being serviced by your mission. So if you're, what policy areas do your constituents currently expect you to be active in? The answer could be none, really. They don't think they don't want us to touch policy stuff. We never have. There's no expectation. We're hoping maybe to build an expectation. That's fine. But answering this question at any level is important because, like I said, there's merit to meeting or managing those expectations. If you're already an organization that is well known for being active in certain types of debates or using your work to elevate certain types of debates, that's an expectation that is a reality for you. And it may be a factor in when you spend capital on advocacy work, that you may be more likely to pick up the phone and make an ask of somebody on a certain policy area because there's an expectation that your organization would already do that. Those are three core questions that I really think organizations should really look at to start this work. And what I'd love to hear from folks, even in the chat, or if you want to come off mute, that's fine. We're all friends here. Is to talk is give me some examples of policy areas that are active right now that fit into those three questions only for your organization. And you can take a second to think about it if you want, but if there's one or two, it's fine. If you have a whole laundry list, happy to hear them. But are there some policy areas that your organizations feel like answer those three questions for you? And again, those three questions are, sneak peek, what's your mission statement? Who are the subjects of your mission statement? And what do folks already expect for you to do? So are there policy areas that you guys are contemplating being active in or are active in that would align with the answers to these three questions? Does anybody have any? If not, I'll pull one out of somebody. So if you're on camera, be ready. And then everyone just went off camera probably. Thank you, Becca. If you're and she mentioned S62, and for those who may not know which one that is, That is, well, Becca, feel free to come off mute if you're able to talk about why that's important to your organization, if you don't mind. If not, I'll put the link in the chat for folks as well. Do you mind sharing?
Yeah. So it's where actually I reached out to Jeff last year to help me out with it because arts and music, they were not allowed last year. It's a program for K through 12 students to have access to $7,500 per student per year. It is income based. And you just basically can't attend the school that you're zoned for. And there's a lot of opportunity within that. But right now they're limiting art programs. They're limiting, so you can't do after school, like creative, the engaging. Sorry, I can't see my comments to see. Like they wouldn't be able to access your program, or if you wanted to go to the symphony or see, orchestras in person, you can't access those things. And so, like I said, I reached out to Jeff last year to see if there's anything to do, and they did allow. They have added arts and music as a category this year, but they have not expanded it to make it so that it's as usable as it could be for parents for their kids. But there's a lot of opportunity within that. And
Great.
actually, I'll do that too. I love that you said the mission statement because I was actually pulling up my notes to write that out at right as you were doing it. So it's just perfect timing.
Good, good, good. Thank you for sharing, Ray. That's really good information, and that's a good example. I know a lot of y'all are probably also very interested. The most common one amongst all of you, I imagine, is state funding for the arts in general, and at the federal level as well, public funding for the arts. Um, that obviously would touch, I would imagine, every arts organization, unless you just have a policy of no public money. But every arts organization would have an interest in that, I imagine, as well as likely arts education for whether it's workforce development for your staff or beyond. So there are a lot of, and thanks for pulling that up, Becca, because that's a great example of something that's not the easiest one to pick. And so that's super helpful to understand. And I think what the point is if you're able to articulate that this policy is impacting us in these ways, you're going to be more confident and more comfortable discussing them. You're being more comfortable and confident in spending capital that you have. And that's a really important decision to make. And we'll talk about why those are in a second. About go dive in a little bit more on that. Um, because what particularly for arts councils, I asked Jeff to kind of share. I think there are a couple arts councils on the call as well, or you have a broad footprint. It's very easy to say yes to policy issues. There have been a lot of policy issues that maybe folks in your audience benefit from. So, there may be things that staff may benefit from, or programs that your organization has benefited from at the state and federal level that may have had drastic changes to it. And it's very easy to say yes to a lot of those because you may have personal relationships with those policies, even with your job hat on, still as an individual relationship with that policy. But your mission should be the starting point on when you say yes and when you say no. For our clients, this has been really important for them because they have seen, well, I'm really passionate about, we'll use one of recent example, we're really passionate about SNAP. We're really worried about the impacts of SNAP funding on our immediate communities. But that is not in our mission statement. So we're having a challenge in identifying ways we can effectively move the needle that our board is comfortable with, that our staff is comfortable with, that our donors would be comfortable with. And so those conversations are really important. And so what we're going to continue to walk through today and what I'm going to go through next is sort of how do I make that decision so that when it comes time to spend that capital, we are comfortable and confident in spending it, and that it is aligned first and foremost with our mission. I'm going to start with principles. The best way, and I wish I had like funner names or more fun. I also wish I had correct English, more fun names for some of these things than advocacy principles, but it works really well. We've learned. So there are you may have a policy issue occur, and that is brought to your doorstep, either at your desk or your organization, and you may say, okay, wait, I don't know if we're going to say yes or no to this. I don't know how to say yes or no to this first. We always advise folks to develop a series of advocacy principles. When do we say yes? When do we say no? It acts as a filter. That's the first thing you have to answer to. that policy issue has to align with one of those principles before you even consider taking any kind of action or spending any kind of capital. And so that's what we're going to walk through first are these principles, and going to talk through these because I think they're really important for organizations. And I will say from experience, in my one of my full time role that I have with a nonprofit association is this has helped us a lot with especially like I said with arts councils. You have a lot of members who may have differing, sometimes counter interests. This really helps. And so, sticking to your principles, why do you need advocacy principles? And it's just exactly for that reason. It is easy to say yes, but if you say yes to everything, you're saying yes to spending time, money, resources, relationships on those policy issues. You may be impacting those expectations from those that you serve, that hey, there's an expectation that when we do act we move the needle, and if we're saying yes to everything, it's really hard to do so. And the vast majority of y'all on this call, everybody could use more people on their team, everybody could obviously use more financial resources, and you start to skew those expectations. So using these advocacy principles is really valuable, because if it doesn't attach to one of them, then we're not going to take action on it. And sometimes that's hard to say to folks, but it is about your mission first, which is why we started there. It is all about your mission and whether or not you are advancing your mission. Um, doesn't mean that they have to be super strict though either. Don't get me wrong, and we'll get into that for a second. And this, you don't have to share this with the group, but I do want to pause and let y'all think on this key question, that is sort of the root of advocacy principles. What is the line, or a line, might have been better to write here. What is a line that an issue must cross before you take any form of action? Is there a red line or a line in the sand that a policy issue has to cross in order for you to say yes at any level? I'm not saying that means you are, and we'll get to this in a second too. That doesn't mean that you're on the front page of the newspaper for the issue, but that you are deciding, yes, it is okay for us to dedicate resources to this issue. Is there a line in the sand that you think should happen first? Or not, and I would stress that this question is what is the line, because I think that is important. I think there should be lines for you to say yes or no to. It could be fair. Again, your staff and your board may feel comfortable and confident in having a broad definition in that area, but odds are it is not anything that is the hot topic of the day. But it is going to be mission aligned. And so that is a key question to consider as we continue on through this. What is the line that a policy issue must cross before we do anything on it? These are some examples of one of our former clients. This is Together SCs, actually, our nonprofit association for the state. These are their 5 advocacy principles that they have, that these are adopted by their board, at the board level. So they talk about if it's a policy issue that impacts the whole sector and their ability to operate as a 501c3 nonprofit, that's going to be a yes. If it's going to say, hey, no one's a C3 anymore, we're going to, yes, that's a yes, of course, that is aligned with our mission. If it impacts charitable status and tax law, because that's sort of a niche area that is a lot more federal focus, yes, they're going to take action on it. Equity and social justice for Together SC is one. Which all of this is available on their website too, if you're interested. But equity and social justice for them, for instance, is one that was fine tuned, and to talk about your ability as a nonprofit to do your programs and aligned with best practices inclusive of equity and social justice. That if you should be allowed to do things in your community in a way that is equitable. And then impacts to democracy, or that could be regulations, could be your ability to, as a nonprofit, to participate appropriately and legally in democracy, hosting town halls, for instance, as long as all candidates are invited, those types of things. And sometimes even obviously redistricting may have impacts on funding models at the federal level. And then, of course, one that should be in everybody's policy advocacy principles are opportunities and threats to your own organization. Of course, if something is, hey, the county budget now has a 0 next to us, that's yes, there's an expectation that you would raise your voice at that point. We also encourage everybody to look at these as you have these be adopted by your board, because that is really important for a couple reasons. One, it forces a conversation for folks. I'm going to go back a slide because this is the key question that boards should be considering. It begins the conversation with those board members. Like I said, it forces that topic. The intent is for them to be fairly evergreen. They might tweak a couple things every now and then. In fact, I always like to phrase the advocacy principles as questions, not as statements. So, for instance, does the policy issue impact a nonprofit's ability to operate effectively and in line with best practices? Frame it as a question so that the answer is either yes or no. And so have the board do that. It also, at the end of the day, provides clarity to the board on, hey, here's the expectation of when the organization is going to act. Here's that expectation question. It gives guidance to the staff on understanding, okay, here's when it's okay for me to go ahead and take the initiative. I'm going to go to that hearing. I'm going to testify on that bill. I'm going to send a letter. And we'll go through in a minute of like, there might be different tiers that you may want to think through on that front. But at the board, the board is comfortable with seeing action being taken, and the staff understands that they have the authority to do so. And so it is really important for the board. And then of course, staff can put that into sort of an operations plan. And we'll talk about that in a second as well. But that is sticking to your principles. And I'd love to hear from folks if you have any if you have an answer to this question for your organization, or an answer that you're contemplating. It doesn't have to be your official stance, but I would love to hear some of y'all so that your colleagues can also see how other arts organizations might be thinking through this. Is there anyone who'd like to volunteer on sort of articulating one of those lines that you think might be being drawn for your organization? Don't all jump in at once. Well, I will put, actually, Jeff, I'm going to come to you if it's okay to put you on the spot, because I think organizations like the Arts Alliance that cover the whole sector, whole arts sector, that also has to focus on the infrastructure of how the sector works, that's easy to say yes to a lot of things, Jeff, I imagine for you and your board to go down rabbit holes on. I'm curious if there is sort of even if it's not codified by the board, but is there for you as the lead staff person, are there certain lines that you sort of assess when a policy issue emerges?
Well, I think the obvious answer is are threats to public funding. That's obviously our primary policy issue. So when those things become in danger, there's no question that we step up to talk about that. A lot of our lines, I think, exist based on the viability, and I think you're going to get that later in your presentation, but I think it has to cross a certain line of viability before it starts to be something that we're aggressively spending capital on versus just monitoring. But I don't want to get ahead of you on that particular topic, because I know that's part of your presentation.
Yeah. Thanks, Jeff. Are there any other thoughts from any other folks on that? Hearing and seeing none. I will pause if there are any questions about this particular part before we start moving into our advocacy capital chapter of this conversation. Are there any questions about this kind of framework for organizations, or everyone feel like it's crystal clear? Right. All right. Moving into this other chapter, understanding your advocacy capital. Alluded to some of this before, but every action, as you know, the old adage, has a equal and opposite reaction. That's physics, but everything every action is going to have a cost associated with it. That's true across the board. That's true for not just advocacy, but that's anything. But for advocacy, there are a lot of capitals that you have to think through. because you only have so much in your account on all of these fronts. So for instance, you're going to have financial capital at play. Depending on the level of action that you want to take, you might be organizing a state house day or multiple state house days and rallies. You might have a geographic footprint that impacts this financial ability to act. You're going to have obviously, all the things that material costs and advertising and all of those things that cost money. You're going to have a financial impact. So understanding, okay, what is our capacity on the financial side to take any sort of action is going to be something you want to think through, if not document. There's also political capital, of course. How many times can you ask that elected official to go to bat for you? The hope is every time, of course. But the reality is, on some things, that's going to cost them political capital, which may cost you political capital. And so that's a factor to think through. But also there's reputation for your. This is where those expectations really start to come in, because it's not just the reputation with those expectations of your constituents. It's also the reputation and the expectations that you have with elected officials. If there's if the I'm gonna pick on our host, the Arts Alliance. If the Arts Alliance were to start going to the lobby of the State House and switching gears and not having funding be their primary thing, that's going to change that perception and reputation with the legislature potentially, especially if it's something that's not really they don't feel like is related to arts in their mind or something. And so you have to weigh those costs. Like, are we willing to put a little bit of stick our neck out a little bit on this and understand that we may have a negative cost when that occurs, but it's for advancing our mission. And so we feel totally comfortable doing so. There's also relationships and relational capital. That's just, hey, if I've got a legislator, for instance, that my issue might be one that is going to be a challenge for them to push through politically, or just it's going to take a lot of legwork on their part. You're just like any relationship, you're withdrawing from that bank account from that relationship a little bit, which is totally fine. I'm not saying you shouldn't, but that's just you have to think through that before you take those types of actions. There's also, of course, staff capacity. Whether or not you guys have the time, space, and ability to actually do the work. Can you go to the State House? Can you watch that hearing? Are you able to, do you have the ability, meaning like, do you have the technology to track a bill and watch what happens, particularly in order to be effective? There's also social capital. This is more boards and audience based. Are we willing to step up to the plate on this, knowing that there may be a cost? Either we're asking our constituents to help us in this. There's always this, fear of advocacy fatigue. If you're asking your audience to always ping their elected official, if that's something you're always asking, there's a little bit of fatigue there. But there's also social capital, asking your board, for instance, a board member to make a call and spending some of that capital that you may have with that board member. Again, spending this capital that's what capital is there for. You're supposed to do something with it. Why else would you have that be a strategy and bank it? But you just have to think through at what level and for what issues are we going to spend. It's just like a budget. You have to be able to build this capital as well and not just spend it. Today, we're not going to necessarily talk about building capital. That's a different conversation, because you just saw how many examples of capital we have. But in terms of political capital, that takes time to build. That's a whole other conversation. This is about spending whatever you have. So we're going to dig into spending this capital. You can't lead on every single issue under the sun. And I think sometimes organizations feel a burden when something happens, maybe in their community or in their immediate vicinity. Sometimes nationally, in the current climate, there's been a lot of instances where folks feel like, well, we have to do something, but they forget to look to their left and the right and see who else is doing that work. And it's very easy to feel the pressure on your organization to do everything. Um, uh, and sometimes you may have to, depending on the size of your community, for instance, or the issue at hand. It's totally possible. But the reality is you probably can't lead on everything. It's just not feasible. You also may not be ready to, which is also fair. Understanding and being realistic of where you are and where you sit, how much capital do you have in all of those banks is something you have to consider and be honest about. If you can't move the needle to the degree you find acceptable, that that should be a factor in your decision making, because then you're going to wait to spend that capital at a time that you can. You also may not be interested that much. There are a lot of issues out there, and I mean that in a kind way, where you as an organization, your mission may not direct you to be interested in this issue as much. You may not be as interested as an arts organization in a gas tax debate, for instance. You may personally be interested in it, or the road out front of you may need some work, but as a systemic thing, that may not be something your mission has expressed interest in, or your advocacy principles. That's okay. That is okay. It also may not meet enough elements on your checklists. So that those are things like, we don't have the capital for all of this. I'm going to talk a little bit. I'm going to dig in on this one a little bit in a second. But it may not meet enough of these sort of triggers for you to say yes, and that's good. That's fine, because those are good conversations to have. Also, legally, you can't sometimes. To be frank, legally, maybe it's a relationship you have with. If you, for instance, I used to run an art center that was owned by the city. I obviously couldn't speak up on some things related to the city legally or ethically. So sometimes you can't do it, and that's okay. Does that mean you need to be silent on things you can't lead on? No, is the answer to this question. You don't have to be silent on things. So how do you balance these things? So we've talked about starting with your mission. We've talked about developing a series of principles that help you decide if something is going to impact that mission and your core subjects. We've talked about the types of capital that you've got, but then you still have this decision of, okay, we said yes to something. Now, what the heck are we going to do about it? What does that look like for our organization? And that's where we always tell folks it is best to put things on a spectrum. Are you going to monitor something? Are you going to just support something? Or are you going to lead or engage in it? I put engage. We had a client that did that, and I thought that was a really good way to phrase it, as well as leading. And so, I think I just put on a future slide, you'll see lead/engage. So some organizations choose engage over lead just because they don't. It's a complicated thing. But are you going to monitor something? Are you going to support something? Or are you going to lead or engage it? Really seriously engage in it? This helps a lot of things, and I'll close with the kind of what it's intent for. But at the end of the day, this is all about, like I said, being confident and comfortable in taking an advocacy action. So what we also tell folks to do is come up with a list of what this looks like for your organization. What does monitoring something look like for your organization? And you would write it down as a part of your advocacy, what we've called an advocacy framework. Monitoring something may just be that, hey, it's on a legislative tracking list. So it's something we're watching. It's maybe an issue that's in the peripheral of our mission, and we found a way to say yes to it because we thought it was important to, and it does align with one of our principles. But we'll see, it's like adjacent, and it could have external impact. So for instance, one could imagine Affordable Care Act subsidies being part of that, because 97% of South Carolinians who are in the marketplace, healthcare marketplace, have healthcare subsidies attached to it. And so that is obviously a workforce issue for a lot of employers. And so, but that's not necessarily an arts centric item. So that could be on the peripheral. It's also things you could say, hey, let's see where this goes. let's see. We don't know what's going to happen here. It could be a crazy idea that's floating out there, and it may not have legs ever. To Jeff's point about viability, which we'll talk about in a second, but let's just see if it grows legs. But it needs to be on our list because we need to be aware of it. And again, only monitor it if it fits one of those principles. And you'll see me hammer that on all three of these. Sorry. And then the next level is of support. And I should say that if you're monitoring something, what does that mean? That's not a lot of quote unquote work, as you can see. We're just seeing where something goes. We're watching it. There's not a ton of capital being spent necessarily on it. Now, there's somebody's looking at a tracking list, somebody's watching that hearing, somebody's reading news articles about it and kind of keeping tabs on it. But you're not asking folks to like call a legislator about it or anything. You may ask a legislator or a county councilman member, how do you feel about this? But it's not something you're really dedicating a lot of serious time to. Take it up a notch, and are we going to support this issue? Are we going to support the work of our organization in taking some other deeper action? That what this has sometimes looked like for organizations is starting with just there's more internal awareness and knowledge. Hey, whole team, here's something that's going on. You should be aware of. Here's what it is. Here's what's going on with it. Here's how it could impact us. Keeping tabs on it. It could be something where there's identified partners already as well. It could be, hey, there's a whole countywide ask for more money, from more funding from a certain pot. And maybe all of us, maybe there's a lead organization, maybe it's your county arts council, but they need collective voices. So there's partners at the table. So there's that's an area where you'll be willing to spend a little bit more, or there's pending or foreseeable action worth taking. So this is where, okay, something has moved now. It's moved from, is something going to happen to this, to, okay, now something's about to happen with this. We need to turn some lights on here. We need to send an email to a legislator. We need to get on the phone and see exactly how this is going to impact us. And so that's, you're going to take more time and effort there. And I say you may not need to be engaged yet, meaning you may not need to fully engage in the issue yet at support. It may be an area where you're highlighting someone else who's doing this work, or you just may not have to like put your name on the newspaper editorial just yet fully. And again, you only take that action if it meets one of your principles. Sorry. Okay. And then at the third tier, are we going to lead or engage on something? So are we, this is when you are spending the most amount of resources on an issue. We have, you're participating in the conversation. You're maybe even hosting the conversation. When I say lead or engage, I don't necessarily mean that you are the only one doing this, but you are taking, for your organization's sake, a fairly leading role. Your attempt is that your name is attached to this issue. So you're participating or maybe even hosting the conversation on this issue. You're giving input on those issues. You are trying to position yourself as a subject matter expert. You are hopefully being seen as the expert on this issue. The media is calling you about it. The elected officials are relying on your input for this issue. Your constituents or partners are also looking to you for guidance on this. And then the other one I want to kind of spend a little bit of time on is using your programs as part of the strategy. Because this is unique to arts organizations, I feel like, more so maybe than others. Because you have the arts sector has a historic, historic history, that's not right, a legacy of using your tools to address societal needs. I remember I went to College of Charleston and did arts management and took a theater class and had to read a bunch of plays written in the WPA period. And you learn in theater history, and as most of you may know as well, but that's how we essentially got OSHA out of it, because we started highlighting workplace issues through works of art. And that helped create the need, plus some catastrophic events physically to some plants, manufacturing facilities. Those all paired together for public pressure and direct need for better regulation of workplaces. And so there is an appropriate strategy for organizations, arts organizations, to use your programming as part of your advocacy work. Now, that is something you have to think through. I put that in this category for y'all because it usually is a conversation I've seen boards have. Does our season have a theme through it that we are trying to kind of make a statement on certain issues? And I don't have guidance on whether that is up to each organization to choose how to approach that. But it is something I feel like that is unique to the arts world, because you have, like I said earlier, you have this ability to produce work, but you have this ability to curate work and curate what audiences see and what they will leave your facility or your event feeling or your class feeling and thinking through. And that is a unique opportunity that could cost a lot more capital, if potentially, either to produce it or financially or in other types of capital. So it's a factor to think through. Again, though, only doing it if it fits one of your principles, ideally. Only doing this to advance a policy issue if that policy issue meets that principle. And so I think that's unique to your sector, that I wanted to definitely highlight for y'all. And then I also there's another layer to this, and then I'm going to have y'all kind of do a little bit of an exercise, so prepping your brain, and I'd love to hear from at least one or two of y'all at the next part. So go ahead and self-volunteer yourself now. But there are some organizations have found it really helpful, and this is something Jeff kind of alluded to what, again, I wish I had more fun names, but I've dubbed a capital checklist that helps in addition to your principles, because there may be a policy issue out there like this fits, like this is something we should do something on, but we don't have the staff capacity, maybe, or maybe we do. These are questions, these are sort of additional operational level questions that go along, that ride alongside your capital. Do we have the capacity? We talked a little bit about that, but when it comes time, push comes to shove, do we have it? Do we have the capital to move the needle at a level we're happy with? Also, kind of, this has been a theme throughout it too. You don't want to put forward an amount of energy to lead on an issue, and then, not that you can still be unsuccessful. Don't get me wrong. There are plenty of policy initiatives where we poured blood, sweat, and tears into something as organizations, and we still come up not on the side that we'd prefer. But do we have the capital that at least has a good attempt at moving the needle? And to Jeff's point, this is the viability piece. Does this thing even have a shot at either passing if it's really good, or do we have a shot at defeating this? Again, that doesn't say you don't take action, but it calibrates how much capital you choose to spend and what types you choose to spend. It may just be, hey, you know what? I don't know if it's going to go anywhere, but we should definitely inform our audiences about it and keep it at the forefront. So we're going to spend time and money on our marketing around this, but maybe we're not activating the full board and calling their friends who may be elected officials, or our staff isn't going to go testify on the bill. That's a conversation that just needs to occur. Additionally, is a coalition present? One of the things that we've learned over the last few years is, this has sort of always been true, but we're seeing it play out, that coalitions work in the advocacy space. They work at varying paces. A great example is, Cover SC, which is focused on Medicaid expansion in our state, has been a coalition for a few years now and is building momentum to at least have, from what we're seeing, to put the issue forward, their issue of Medicaid expansion. We've seen housing nonprofits really do a lot of great work in building a coalition for the long game. So if a coalition is present on an issue, that may move the needle forward. You say, hey, you know what? We're not in this alone. We can still take a leading role in this, but we're not going to be standing by ourselves. That's a good item to have on your list. And then, are there any risks to the long-term health of the organization? And this is one that I know weighs on executive directors a lot. And potentially boards, is the arc of our organization. Will this critically injure anything in the future? Or flip it, are there immense upsides in the future? And so the risk might be worth it. And so because there are, whether that is just, I'm not saying that is what decision you should make around that, again, because sometimes risks are worth taking for the issue if it's critical enough. for your organization, but you don't necessarily you want to weigh that at the leadership level. All of these things that we've talked about are things that we always advise. So we talk about advocacy principles being adopted by the board because those are a little bit evergreen, and they, the board then feels a lot more comfortable seeing when action takes place. We also then advise folks to go through that lead, monitor, and support framework and say, okay, so if we say yes to something, what does leading look like for us? What does monitoring look like for us? And writing that down, and that doesn't necessarily have to be board adopted per se, but having the senior leadership team looped in or your board looped in, here's what this looks like, because then you have really good clarity on not only when do you act, but how do we act and in this space. Particularly for organizations that are seeing the emerging demands on their advocacy work, it's really helpful to know, okay, if our policy agenda comes before us and or the director comes before us and says, hey, we're going to take a lead on this issue, there's no questions on what does lead look like? Well, we already have this policy or this practice that leading looks like this. And then there can be a conversation around, well, do we have the capacity for that? Is there another coalition present? Are other people doing this faster and deeper than us? We can, maybe we'll just support something. But having that clarity is really helpful for everybody involved. And then also when you it's also helpful when there might be criticism on you taking action, which does occur from time to time. Why did we speak up on this issue? Why didn't we just stay quiet? Or I don't agree with the statement we said, or I agree with half of it. There is then a framework to lean on. It says, hey, here's how we made this decision. It was clearly articulated. We understood the capital we were going to spend. This was calculated. This wasn't a gut reaction. And even if you have to do it fast, it still was not based on, in the moment, a decision that was made in one room. It was a thoughtful process. And organizations have tended to really appreciate that approach. So I always advise to write all of this down. And so to that end, I'm going to take a couple of minutes, like two, maybe three, because I know I'm not asking, this isn't like homework and a robust thing, but I would love for you to either think about or write down some of these things. And I would love to hear from probably two of y'all, because I think different disciplines and different types of organizations may have different answers to this. And I would love to hear what you think monitor, support, and engage, or lead, should have done the slash, sorry, this is my fault, lead/engage look like for your organization. It could just be one bullet point for each. Here's an example of what that looks like for us, we think. At least where your seat is, whether you're a director or you're not a executive director, either way. But then also, I guess sort of the question that helps inform that, the good framing, is what should your board expect or be comfortable seeing without much notice for each of those levels. So that second question isn't one to really like write an answer to, but it should inform what you write under monitor, support, engage. This is something my board would feel comfortable seeing without much notice given, without much robust debate. So I'll pause here for about 1 to 2 minutes, and I wish Zoom could play music to help. But it will take a couple of seconds here to work on that.
GP, can I tag on to that real quick? Just to
please do.
Hopefully frame this a little bit wider for everyone. I think it's easy to get hung up on the phrase public policy, right? And then you're kind of in this legislation hole. But I just kind of want to remind everybody on the call that it doesn't have to just be about legislation, right? That's a lot of the work that we do. But there are decisions that happen locally around you, monthly, weekly, that don't go through this extensive legislative process like a lot of state policy does, right? So it might be helpful to kind of think through that frame of ways that your organization might be comfortable engaging in that work, even if it's just being present for that work. How often are you comfortable engaging at city council meetings, right? Or giving public comment, right, during Arts Advocacy Week, or serving on, citizens commissions and committees, right? Those are all things that take time and capital as well, but might not necessarily be about tracking a specific piece of legislation.
Good point, Jeff. Yeah, this is all levels. Um, we've seen this help organizations at the county level under, or mayor races. We had an organization go through this, and they ended up hosting a town hall for their mayor race. And because they felt it purely aligned, because there had been there was a perception about their issue area in their local community, and so they wanted to kind of demystify that, and they used the mayor's race as an opportunity to do so. So yes, it can be any level, any type of issue. It doesn't have to be specific to just one specific piece of legislation. It could be an issue area and that could be, hey, we just need awareness too, potentially. But yeah, identifying what your organization, is comfortable seeing is important. I would love to hear from if anyone's got anything written down or in your brain about this particular question. If you wouldn't mind just coming off mute and volunteering. Going once,
So this is
going
Jen.
twice.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes, you're good.
Okay, this is Jen Ross at the Gibbs Museum in
Hey,
Charleston.
Jen.
Hey there. This has been super helpful. I don't really know if this is going to be if this is answering, but I will say that we have been really somewhat evaluating internally and kind of watching externally how we manage our DEAI,
Yeah.
in the sense that, I mean, I think it does go up and can affect us, as with many
Hmm.
organizations, because we have an established committee. We have a lot of material, our strategic plan, everything, our visual arts that relate. And there's just been a lot of conversation around, how we are continuing, do we change things given the climate? And so there was a lot of concern because you had people saying, don't do anything. And so we have actually, we have we've talked to council, with the city of Charleston, and their lawyers, and just, talked to other organizations about how they're managing some of these issues, because we do have a committee of board members. And so it's just been sort of at the forefront. So that, I don't know. I mean, that
Yeah.
has been that's one area that we actually have some individuals who are out there in the community and also involved in other organizations and kind of having these discussions. So, I mean, that's just one example.
Yeah. No, that's a good example. It is a very big one, a big topic, and a big sort of what's the word I'm looking for? Issue area. That's the word. I one perspective on that, or one I guess perspective on that is we've had similar conversations with folks across the state, and how do I phrase this? We leaned on our advocacy principles with those organizations.
Mhm.
So it was okay. How does DEIA work? Uh, how is that related to our mission? And it's not that there's sometimes usually there's not a binary to some of these principles. It's not a pure yes or no. It's how does this, if this is valuable to us, sort of like aligning with your values, it's here's why this is important to our mission. For instance, the example I showed had equity and social justice as a means of best practice for the industry and for the nonprofit sector, and that anything that impedes the ability of a nonprofit to operate equitably and to deliver services equitably is something that organization was going to raise up as, yes, we're going to speak up when that happens. So and so that when the issue comes up, it is directly attached to your mission, because what we found is if you can find that space, then you
Mhm.
can speak with a lot more authority and confidence on issues like that. I mentioned like the Affordable Care Act, premium tax credit subsidies, those, hey, not 100% of our staff, but are tapping into that. That might be an issue that don't want to speak for any organization, but you could see organizations seeing a way to take some form of action around that potentially, if they could find a way, if one of their principles was attached to that. So I think again, it's leaning on that structure so that you are able to answer the question. Here's why it matters to our mission. and here and now, and depending on where it is locally or larger, here's the type of actions we're taking, because you could, in theory, then find a way to speak up on that issue. But again, if your reasoning is not necessarily, your reasoning might be different than the next person after you. There's the 4-hour state house hearing on an anti DEI bill this past year, and there were a lot of stories that were a little similar, but then there were some that were totally different. Of thinking through, well, at this organization, here's what this would mean for us, because it impacts our ability to operate. I have found a lot of strength in conversations around that particular issue, DEIA, of you're impacting our ability to do our work, and what role would a governmental authority like to play in impeding my ability to work. That is bit I have felt more comfortable and confident in that seat. So I hope that's a little helpful, Jen, of
No, that's
framing
great. Thank you.
and how you
Jotting
can
these
use
notes
this.
down. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll echo GP that back to that conversation of a red line, right? The reason that 3927 like crossed that line for us, right, and went into that really engaged, like, hey, we're going to submit testimony, is because of the direct impact, right? And then that gave us space to introduce the additional conversation on why it's important for organizations to have autonomy to provide the type of programming, right, that their communities are asking for, right, or programming that reflects the community that they serve, right? But that once we had the text of the bill, that gave us the opportunity to step in, because that was having a direct impact would have a direct impact on grantees, right, and their ability to do any of their work, because they received that government grant.
Right. Yep. Thank you.
Yeah. Does anyone else have anything? And I'll go ahead on this, or we can also go ahead and open the floor up here in the last few minutes of just anything in general on these topics. Any sort of I don't know, stuff noodling around in your head, to Jen's point of an issue that they're currently kind of trying to articulate ways that they take action that the way they feel appropriate in this area. Is anything coming to mind for anybody? Well, I want to I guess sort of just quickly say that again, all of these things I think are really helpful for you as a team to go through. Um, and because as a follow-up exercise for teams after we go through this, we often ask them to write. So what type of advocacy work would be part of your job description? So if you were to add, I'm not saying that every job description should have advocacy in it. That's up to the organization. But to think through, okay, well, what type of actions can I be like, oh, well, I would be interested in monitoring things maybe, or gauging the comfort level of your team is really important in this work too. And so first, today's topics were all focused on, for the organization's sake altogether, how do we frame this out? How do we make a decision on when to spend capital, and how do we map out what our capital is like on a particular issue? But there are other layers to this, and that is gauging the comfort level of your staff and your board and your donors and your audiences. And again, all of it not to necessarily find a way to know on issues. That's not the intent. It's a way to find that spot that we just mentioned in the previous conversation, that sweet spot of where you feel comfortable and confident taking action, and that you can go back and say, well, here's how we made this decision, and here's who was involved, and they were all comfortable being involved. And you can stand on your own 2 feet if it comes to a point where you have to talk through that process, whether that's to your board or to a funder, or to the public even. Why is this important to us? So I think I hope that this was helpful for you all to think through. I hope you wrote some of this down. The slides Jeff has the slides, so Jeff has my contact information. If you just want to chat about an issue, happy to do so. And if there are no other questions or anything, Jeff, I can turn it over to you for if you have any sort of closing thoughts or any wrap up. And I greatly appreciate the time today.
Sure. Thanks, GP. Yeah, I always whenever I talk to folks about the work of the Arts Alliance, I always position it in the levels in which we work, right? And at the state level, we're obviously positioned to lead, right? And I think it's totally appropriate to see us as the coalition that's providing direction and kind of helping guide what's monitored and what's engaged with. We're not the sole voice, but we certainly want to be a leader there. We're never going to step into a community and show up at a city council meeting and speak on behalf of the arts organizations there, unless we're asked to, right? So we really look toward the local level when you guys are engaging with those issues, and we want to really play a supporting role. So I say all that to say that I have this dream where all citizens commissions and committees in all the localities in South Carolina have the representation of artists or arts leaders on them. So not just the public art commissions, right? Not just the mural commissions, but on the planning committees, right? And other opportunities to just have a seat at the table, because that can be a really good way, if your organization has the capacity to support a staff member doing that, that can be a really good way to just be dialed in on those issues. So that way, when it does come up, you're ahead of it, and then we're happy to support in any way that we can. So it's a lofty dream, but just something to consider and take away from this of ways that we might be able to engage more artists and arts organizations in that local leadership. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for tuning in today. We really appreciate you being on here. We're here for anything you need, so don't hesitate to reach out to me or GP if there's anything we can do to support you. Have a great rest of your week.